Well, hello and welcome to this very, very special edition of Talk Time. Today we're going to be talking about a group called Dream Defenders, and they come from the United States of America. So we will talk a bit about the United States of America, we'll talk about the impressions of Ghana, and hey, any other thing that comes up. Welcome to Talk Time.
Welcome to Calm Trading and Farms Limited. We are the sole importers and distributors of FM World Rulong Plus Plus combined harvesters. We are the sole importers and distributors of FM World combined machines. If you buy from us, spare parts are readily available. Our machines can pick and harvest logged rice as well as standing rice and is 102 horsepower. FM World tractors also have 110 horsepower, which is fully hydraulic and can break hard grounds. Our rotavators is also 102 horsepower. It works perfectly in muddy areas and in lands where tractors cannot operate. World combined harvesters come with automatic gear drive, diesel power engine, 1.77 cubic grain storage tanks, 2.2 meter cutting width, 360-degree unloading pipe, and sunshade, as well as 2 diesel filters. Our branches include Tamale Airport area, Accra Ritz Junction. Kindly call us on 0278 223 811 or 0550 108 899. as well as 020-1600-727. Don't buy fake, buy original. Buy from us now. Come Trading and Farms Limited, your best importers and suppliers of FM World Rulong Plus Plus combined harvesters.
Hello and welcome back to Talk Time. And as I indicated, we're going to be talking about Dream Defenders from the United States of America. We're going to be talking about the US. We're going to be talking about Africa and any other thing that comes up. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this very, very special edition of the program. First of all, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, maybe starting from you.
Okay, I'm Jonelle. I'm one of the co-directors of Dream Defenders.
And you?
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel. I'm also one of the co-directors of Dream Defenders and very grateful to be here with you all today.
Hello everyone, my name is Naila. I am also a co-director of Dream Defenders, also a co-founding member.
Now, what is Dream Defenders?
Dream Defenders is an organization based in Florida in the United States that was founded after a 17-year-old boy named Trayvon Martin was killed by a vigilante. We were young black and brown youth in Florida who wanted to do something. We knew that there were bigger problems at play. The conditions that led to a young boy being killed in his neighborhood were things that we had to fight against. And so we've now been an organization for 10 years, fighting against the prison system, fighting against policing, criminalization of young black and brown people. And we're also, along the way, became a socialist, internationalist, feminist organization.
Wow.
All the things.
All the things. First of all, let's talk about socialism. It seems strange to be talking about socialism in the heart of capitalism. Mm-hmm. What is the motivation? What drove you towards socialism?
Yeah. Well, as Naila said, we started in 2017 after the killing of Trayvon Martin, and we definitely had no dreams of being socialist or like that wasn't a thought that we had, and I don't think we even had a full picture of the system of capitalism that we were under. But luckily, we've been able to be in relationship and study with a lot of comrades over the years. And I think for our organization in 2014, we had an opportunity to go to Brazil and meet with the MST and go to like an international youth conference. And it completely changed our perspective of what it meant to be socialist. It changed our perspective of like black people being socialist. In the US, it tends to be white people that you see who are proclaiming to be socialist. It doesn't feel like a space that black people are a part of. But it was really going to Brazil and seeing what they were doing, what they were building, how they were fighting, what they were studying, that shifted the trajectory of our organization and really made us start to take socialism seriously and the project of building socialism seriously. And since then, it's been a huge part of our organization and our identity as people in the States who are like in the belly of the beast of capitalism. Really understanding that it's a part of our duty to upend this capitalist society, this white supremacist society, and bring a socialism.
What is the trend that connects feminism, socialism, black and brown activism? What is that thread that connects all of this?
Well, I was, thinking about Jonel's reflection and the capitalist class has erased the fact that the black liberation movement in the U.S. has, for the most part, always been anti-capitalist, led by communist Marxists. And it was actually really powerful going to the Du Bois Center because the first sentence they said about Du Bois was he was a Pan-Africanist, a scholar, and a Marxist, very, very clearly. And that history is so erased from our context in the U.S. And socialism, as Jonel was saying, is often seen as like a white thing. But when our experience is getting the opportunity to go to Palestine, getting the opportunity to be here, getting the opportunity to go to Brazil, seeing the clarity of black and brown people around the world, that Marxism is the politic, definitely, is what inspired Dream Defenders to become a Marxist organization. And I think we see the oppression of women, black and brown people as deeply tied. These are interwoven systems, as deeply tied together, and that we can't, there's a lot of co-option in the U.S. The feminist movement is about identity or somehow women making it in capitalism, and we're trying to upend all of that, saying you actually can't liberate women, you can't liberate black and brown people without the total transformation of our economic system.
What are some of the difficulties that you're encountering? Because people who try to do what you're doing have had a lot of difficulties. People in the Black Panther movement, in the early communist movement, and so on. What are your difficulties? What difficulties are you facing?
I mean, first I would say being in Florida, with the governor that we currently have, wants to be the president of the United States. Governor Ron DeSantis particularly targets organizations like ours. He passes laws like HB1. That was a law he passed in 2021 after the uprisings of 2020 to basically outlaw protest. He also passed the Stop Woke Act, which is, basically stopping the teaching of black history in Florida schools. So we've got somebody in power in Florida and has nearly absolute power that is constantly attacking our work. We do voter registration. We register young people to vote. He passes laws to make that harder and to criminalize us, potentially, target organizations, put them in jail for that kind of work. So that acutely, that is one of the troubles we're facing in Florida is the really virulent rule of somebody like Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I'd also say just societally, capitalism, particularly in the United States, breeds individualism. And it makes it hard to build an organization that requires people to be in relationship, to be in struggle, when so much of what we're taught is to be for I and to be for self. And particularly in this moment after the pandemic where folks were like locked away, isolated, it feels even harder to get back to a place of like community, connection, accountability to one another, which makes it hard to organize because what we're trying to bring to people is different and contrary to what society says we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to care about each other. So in a lot of ways, that is like a huge challenge that we're overcoming around like how we are supposed to be together in order to even struggle and win the things that we're trying to win.
And building off that point, I think the rise of social media, many young people, the armchair activism, they think that they see their politic about as much as sort of like an identity as opposed to like a process of actually being in struggle. So maybe they have lots of, I think the internet on the one hand has politicized young people, they have access to a lot of language, but it doesn't go farther than making posts. And, actually getting young people to see the collective process of struggle, the collective process of liberation, being in community with one another is a huge challenge. And I think there's a very, very strong anti-organization sentiment in the U.S. right now among young people, and a very strong pessimism that young people don't really think it's actually possible to build organization or be in struggle with one another.
What about the general atmosphere of Florida? I mean, the base of anti-Cuban, anti-Castro activities, the stronghold of the Republican Party and so on. That general atmosphere, how does that affect your work?
I mean, for many, many years, we've called Florida the ground zero of the sort of political experiments of the Republican Party, right? All the things that they want to try nationally usually happens in Florida first. And in Miami, South Florida particularly, where we all live, I mean, it feels nearly impossible to change anything. Right now, you've got the joining of the Cuban Americans, the reactionary Cuban Americans, aligning with fascist, white supremacist missions. So where once they were only really vocal about the blockade or Cuba or, hating Democrats, now they're also running for school board and wanting to ban books about history and, flying the Cuban flag and the White Lives Matter and the thin blue line flag, right? We're seeing in this moment, especially since 2020, an aligning of white supremacy and the Cuban Americans in South Florida in a way that feels unique to the moment. And also the corruption in South Florida. I mean, there's one person that got hired by the county in Miami-Dade County who called it the Cuban Mafia and was quickly fired. So yeah, it is very rough. Rachel, I think you've got some perspective because of the HJC and what it's like there in Miami.
Yeah, I mean, just building off what Naila said, the level of red baiting is so high. So they will call anything socialist in order to just instantly kill the policy, the policy. So things very simple like, there was an ordinance that was around criminalizing people who were homeless, arresting them, and people were fighting against it. And they were like, look at these socialists fighting against criminalizing homelessness, or, hey, we're going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. They call that socialism, and it instantly basically kills any sort of movement, it's very, very challenging to sort of be able to build any momentum around any progressive campaigns in Florida because of that environment. And then I'd just say the other thing is that the right, as Naila said, has been working, 40, 50 years to build out a very strong political infrastructure in Florida. So we have the highest funded Republican Party, more Koch brothers money than anywhere else in the country. And they've used that to destroy the trade union movement. They've used that to destroy, progressive organizations. And so, many poor white people are actually voting against their own interests because there's not the same sites of struggle that there used to be. The trade unions were one of the main organizational entities where poor people were in struggle with one another. And because they've destroyed that type of infrastructure, now there's just a very extreme polarization and, extreme level of divide and conquer where they, tell white people, you don't have a job, not because of all the tax cuts that we're giving to billionaires, but because of, your next door neighbor who's black or this immigrant who's moving to the country. So there is just a lot of, they call it dog whistle politics in the U.S. where they use racism to destroy any possibility to build class solidarity and actually be able to build the power needed to transform things.
I would also just add, Florida has a lot of problems and Florida's not a monolith, and there are lots of people in Florida who are like us and want a different reality in a different state. And I think to the point, Florida has been led by Republicans for the last 20 years. It's been like a trifecta Republican leadership. And with that power that they've had, they've put in laws that make it impossible for us to even win the victories that people want. So even in the last election we just had, folks across the state, housing is through the roof, and people voted to have a
Rent stabilization.
Yes, for rent stabilization in Central Florida. But because the Republicans have set up these laws, folks are constantly being preempted. So in this case, the courts were like, you can't do that. But 80% of the community was like, we want rent stabilization. So there's also, because they've been in power so long, they've put all of these stopgaps where the people in Florida who do want progress, whenever we get progress, whenever we win a thing, they're like, nope, here's this law. So I think that's an important part of how we talk about Florida as well, because it's not just the Cubans in Miami. It's a whole slew of other people.
Well, viewers, we're talking to the three co-directors of Dream Defenders based in Florida in the United States of America. And we're trying to cover as much ground as we can, trying to learn about the organization, learn about the environment within which it works, and its connections with struggles all over the world. Special edition of Talk Time, and please stay with us. Interesting. Now, there's a perception that the Democratic Party is a socialist party. And that perception is fed by the presence of people like Bernie Sanders and so on. Is there any substance to that perception?
Who's going to take it?
Go ahead.
I'm thinking.
I mean, it feels like an easy answer.
Right.
By no means is the Democratic Party in the U.S. a socialist party. There's
No measure.
Yeah. It's definitely something that the right uses to say about the Democrats, but there's very little about the Democratic Party that aligns with socialism. I think Bernie Sanders and a few other people in the Democratic Party maybe identify as democratic socialists or just progressives, but there isn't a strong political party in the United States that is really socialist in any way.
Is there any substantial difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party? Substantial difference?
Some would say no, and some would say yes.
What do you
I
say?
think political parties in the U.S. are, if if we were structured like any other country, there'd probably be 16 political parties, you know? But, so when you talk about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, there's lots of factions within those two parties. So I would say, yeah, there is a difference between an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and a Ted Cruz. But is there a difference between we have these two Democratic senators that have basically blocked. They're basically Republicans, but they've blocked any sort of progressive legislation at the congressional level. So I think it's a lot more nuanced. I would say I think structurally both parties are operating in the interests of the capitalists, and there's so much money that in the American political system, and that they're ultimately driving that money leads to that most politicians fighting in the interests of the corporations and the capitalist class. But I think that there are outliers, and what we're seeing is a movement of politicians like AOC, Ilhan Omar, who are starting to gain more momentum and create a much more progressive faction within the Democratic Party.
And that only goes so far.
Oh, okay.
Right.
On foreign policy, again, AOC, who is somebody who many times we are aligned with, they always sort of get choked up when it comes to foreign policy. They vote for the dome in Israel, or they vote for additional military funding. I mean, I think that the way that our Congress is set up is you're not ever only voting for one thing. They slip in other agreements, and so they make excuse, I wanted this part of the thing to go in. So, even the progressive label, which is about as good as we have in the United States as far as politicians go, doesn't go far when you think about other countries.
You said that you're committed to internationalism. One of the burning issues around the world now is Palestine. What's your position on Palestine?
So we are very pro-Palestine. We, one of our founders is Palestinian, and to our very first march that we organized around the murder of Trayvon Martin, he brought a keffiyeh, and he always made connections between, his experiences growing up between East Jerusalem and South Florida, the commonalities and struggle he saw between black and brown people in the U.S. and Palestine. So in 2015, we had the opportunity to send a delegation of black and brown organizers in the U.S. to Palestine, and we have done many delegations since. I think we've been a big part of. There's a huge public opinion around Palestine. It's changing in the U.S. through the BDS movement, and we're just seeing a huge culture shift. For decades, Israel just completely monopolized the conversation, and everything was very pro-Zionist, even on in the movement. And I think our organization and others have been a big part of. We're seeing a big shift around that. We were a part of the Movement for Black Lives, which is a coalition of many black organizations in the U.S. We were a big part when we came out with our a policy platform in 2015 with all these organizations. We had a whole plank around speaking out against the occupation of Palestine, and there was actually a lot of backlash that we experienced. There was, the same way Dr. King experienced backlash when he spoke out against the Vietnam War, but we experienced that many funders and many liberals were like, we thought y'all were just going to focus on civil rights issues, black issues. Now you're talking about Palestine. So we faced a lot of organizational backlash, and we've stood strong that that we are fighting for a free Palestine, and that if there is somebody experiencing oppression in another part of the world, we can never experience freedom. How deeply intertwined our struggles are, and that we can't fight for freedom in the U.S. without fighting for freedom around the world.
What about the embargo on Cuba? In fact, the blockade of Cuba.
Yeah. I mean, we feel the same way. We know that many of the things that politicians in the United States lay at the feet of the socialist project and the revolutionary project in Cuba is due to this international blockade. The conditions of the people on the island, the poverty, the infrastructure. You know, they say, look, socialism doesn't work, but we know that this has become a project of the United States. We're 90 miles away from Cuba, and the United States has always wanted control of the island. And so, yes, we want an end to the blockade.
Finally, is there any chance of Donald Trump walking back to the White House?
You want to take it?
I mean, is there any chance? Absolutely. I mean, he still has a huge following and supporters that are behind him. It's between him and Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, as the potential GOP or Republican candidates. So he's very much still in the conversation, very much still loved. And it's really between those two. So at the very least, there's a lot of potential for him to be the candidate and then, to maybe end up back in the White House.
Wow. You agree?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what's very scary right now is, in the U.S. we have petty bourgeois democracy. Like, we have elections, and elections, there might be extreme limitations of our options and our choice, but we still have elections. And the GOP right now is, the reality is that white rich men are becoming the minority in the country. We're seeing, young people of color become the majority, and they're very fearful of how that's going to impact their ability to win elections. So while Trump is scary, I think what's much scarier is this larger GOP movement to basically make our elections not matter at all anymore. And there's obviously extreme problems with our election system, but they want to make it so that our elections are completely rigged, which I think will drastically change the conditions of our movement. So many of us are trying to understand the GOP strategy and how we need to orient towards it, because we might in 5-10 years be in completely different conditions of our elections and their role, in our movement. So,
well, thanks a lot for coming to the studio and sharing your ideas with us. You're welcome anytime you're in Ghana to come to the studio for the conversations to continue. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Now, viewers, we're talking to the three co-directors of Dream Defenders based in the United States of America. They're socialists, they are feminists, they are anti-racist, and so many other things. Hope you enjoyed the conversation and hope that you learned a thing or two. I learned a lot. Hope that you also learned a thing or two. Please take my advice. Keep your dial on Pan-African Television, because we bring you the best in news, best in current affairs, best in sports, best in entertainment, best in everything. Keep your dial on Pan-African Television until we meet again next week. Bye-bye from me and the entire production team of Pan-African Television. Bye-bye.